If I told you the state had given itself the power and its police force the power to go into someone's home, property or vehicle, take their guns off of them because of their views, attitudes and opinions, would you think I would be talking about my home country of Australia? I am. I am talking, of course, about the so-called sovereign citizen raids that occurred on my home soil of Western Australia the other week. Now, they got away with this. They have the power to do this now in WA as part of the new gun laws, where it says in black and white, someone's views, attitudes or opinions can be a reason to deny a firearms license or disarm the person. Now, obvious question, who determines what views, attitudes or opinions are acceptable in 2025 in Western Australia? Do we need to have threats of violence, perhaps? Do we need to sit before a judge to determine this? No. They do not need to do any of that. Natural justice, proper procedures, out the window, because the state government under the Labor Party in the last term of government, who had absolute majority in both houses of parliament, so they passed things in one day, they could do that. And they pushed through these new gun laws and have given the police the power to disarm people based on their views, attitudes, or opinions. Dystopian. So I've got some more information about this because I know it is still a very topical issue and I am wild about it. It keeps me up at night because this was the one thing that stood out to me like dog's balls when I first read the discussion paper about these laws. And I said in writing as part of my submissions, because I try and be a part of the democratic process that we're meant to have in WA, consultation, listening to the people, making sure we write laws that we can actually abide by and still do our activities. I wrote in here, and I actually quoted Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. My favourite uncle in Kangaroo Island loves quoting this at me. Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. The right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Now, Australia is a signatory to this declaration. I'm not big on big government international organisations. I understand we have the sovereignty with our own governments, but we are a signatory to this and we love bragging about being signatories to all sorts of things. But when it comes to writing laws, the government in WA is happy to turn a blind eye to one of the fundamental freedoms that we all are born with, the freedom of speech. So let's have a look at what was said in the Western Australian Parliament. A question was put to a Labor minister from a Liberal minister. Liberal in Australia is meant to be our Conservative Party, while Labor are what you would call Liberals or Democrats over here. There are quite a few stark differences, but that's a rough ballpark for you. So a question was asked about these bloody raids. What's going on? How did you determine or find out that these people had these views, attitudes or opinions? And he's responded, individuals were identified using behavioural and ideological indicators informed by police intelligence. This included previously recorded incident management system alerts relating to sovereign citizen activity. So they've been monitoring sovereign citizen activity, on Facebook? Intelligence from law enforcement databases and common indicators such as the denial of the legitimacy of legitimate authority of government. These criteria were applied in the context of risk assessment and firearm licensing reviews. The denial of the legitimate authority of government. So nowhere in that does it mention the threats of violence, discussion of destroying government property, public property, behavioural and ideological indicators. Now, it's important to note Sovereign Citizens is not a declared terrorist group in Australia. As I've said in my other videos, I've met some of these blokes. It's quite an interesting conversation at the Friday night at the pub, talking about the Australia Act. Australia is a corporation. It's very interesting, non-violent. But this is the first group of people in WA that the government has targeted with these new gun laws. So as of 10th of October 2025, 23 charges have been laid. I'm still waiting to hear back from an individual, a woman who contacted me about this. She sent a very detailed explanation of what happened. I'm a bit worried because I haven't heard from her, but maybe she's had charges laid against her. And then this is the rap sheet for the individual's charge. 13, sorry, I need my glasses, I'm getting old. 13 charges of fail to store firearm in compliant cabinet. Now, also note that the storage laws have changed as part of these new gun laws. Insane storage requirements. A 10mm safe if you have 2 handguns or more. CCTV footage and alarms. There's a storage matrix floating around on the cesspits of social media and some of the gun groups if you want to have a look at exactly what it looks like. You can't be storing your firearm by your bed. 4 unlawful possession of ammunition. So in this case, if you are not licensed to have that particular caliber of ammunition, because you don't have the firearm of that caliber, you can be charged with unlawful possession of ammunition. Meanwhile, I can pop down to my local gun shop and buy anything I like. 1, fail to secure ammunition. Ammunition has to be stored in a separate lock box to your firearms. Perhaps that's what's happened here. 2, charges possess prohibited accessory suppressors. Now, suppressors or sound moderators or silencers, whatever you want to call them, are banned in Australia unless you are a professional shooter, and that's someone who gets paid to do that task. They usually work for the government, good old government contracts. We have to give them suppressors, but my old dad who goes hunting, culling goats up in the hills in Napperby, can't possibly have a suppressor. 1, possess controlled weapon, compound bow. Here is another thing. This is the first time I'm reading this, by the way. So bows are also a regulated weapon in Australia. In my birth state of South Australia, bow hunting is now banned, even on your own private property. You can no longer hunt with a bow, despite that being one of the oldest traditions of hunting. That's illegal. 1, possess prohibited drug cannabis. 1, cultivate prohibited drug cannabis. We are still in 2025. This conversation always blows my mind. We are treating a plant like it's the same as bloody heroin. So this is what charges have been laid as a result of those sovereign citizen raids. Now, this also came up in the Parliament this week. There has been debate in relation to the review, which just finished. If you haven't seen my videos on those hearings yet and the report, please watch them. But basically, the report from that review into WA's gun laws was tabled in the Parliament this week, and the chair of the committee tabled it, as is the process in our parliamentary system. And the members of Parliament, this is in the Legislative Council, the Upper House or the Senate equivalent, had the chance to have their say. So this first video that I will play is from the Honourable Dr. Brian Walker of the Legalised Cannabis Party. he brought this issue of sovereign citizens and the raids up. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
I mean, I put out a little social media post the other day there when I saw the sovereign citizens had their firearms removed. Now, say what you will about sovereign citizens, and I think we can say an awful lot about sovereign citizens. The emails I'm receiving are, how can I put this, interesting. But not everyone who has such ideas is of a mind to overthrow the government with violence.
Bingo.
And yet, by simply designating them as associated with that particular belief, you now are no longer able to have your firearms that based on a pure as an assumption, a belief. Now, I get that. It's a reasonable way to think. But can you not see how that might be further developed? Can you not see how that might incrementally encroach?
Can you not see how this might be applied to other groups in society who are not a public safety threat because they have not threatened or carried out any violence? Can you not see, if you're not sympathetic to the sovereign citizen cause because they scare you, because of what's going on in the bloody woodlands of Victoria, Desi Friedman still on the run? It's a whole other story happening on the other side of the country, which was used to justify sending the jackboots of the state out for these so-called sovereign citizens. Can you not see that this could be used on other minority groups? Indigenous Australians? Immigrants of a particular race has been done before, World War II. Japanese, Germans, Harndorf up in Adelaide Hills. A lot of Germans were put in camps and disarmed. This is history repeating itself. And as Dr. Walker said, this could encroach into other groups because the government of the day doesn't like your views, attitudes, or opinions. Terrifying. Now let's listen to what else he had to say.
Then you say, well, listen, it's a dangerous thing. Firearms are dangerous. Yes, they are. They kill. That's what they're designed for. Or target shooting. But you're training how to kill. And we then look and see, well, okay, what actually happened in the previous Firearms Act? And the police couldn't give me the numbers, so I went through it myself to find out what was there and found out that the vast majority of the incidents involving firearms in the previous 5 years had occurred despite legislation. The police had allowed known criminals to maintain weapons. They had allowed those with mental health issues to maintain firearms. They had allowed those out on bail to retain their firearms. The vast majority of the incidents with firearms were caused by people who shouldn't have had firearms allowed in the first place according to the previous act.
The other problem with this is the judges that let these people out on bail. We're seeing it happen time and time again. Failure to protect society by letting these known criminals back into society. But it's the sovereign citizens that are the problem.
And the regulations contained therein. And so the question I had put is, what's different about this one? Will the police be any more attentive to the legislation that we have created? More attentive to the regulations that they have permitted? And I've yet to be convinced that they will. So we've got here in place regulations and legislation which, the numerous times where it's been said by the committee itself, Henry VIII aspects of this legislation have been flouted.
I'll come back to the Henry VIII stuff because I can hear the American mind going, what the bloody hell are they talking about Henry VIII in WA in 2025? But another politician got up and spoke about the views, attitudes and opinions. This is the Honourable Phil Twiz from the Liberal Party. Now, I helped him get in. He was lower down on the ticket for the Liberal Party. He was aligned with the Honourable Nick Garan, who has continued to prosecute the case for fairer firearm laws, or at least have some sort of respect for the procedure when you're writing gigantic pieces of legislation. So Phil Twiz got in at the last election and he has been a friend. He said he was a friend before, and he's proven to be thus far. And this is what he said about the views, attitudes and opinions inclusion in the laws that were written before he came to Parliament.
My real issue is with Section 150, particularly Section C, which talks about views, opinions and attitudes. And I agree with my honourable colleague, Honourable Simon Ehrenfeld and the Honourable Dr Brian Walker, that this is just a power that should not reside with the police and the police commissioner. And my sense from what I've been, my reading of this and my research of this, is that his decisions based on that effectively take him away from the power, from the protection of the Parliament. We can't disallow acts of Parliament from this House. To change that, or to change that particular part of the Act, would have to go through both Houses of Parliament.
That is actually a very important comment. So because this is written in the Act, not the regulations, the Act is written by the bill is written by the Parliament, and that becomes the Act when it is passed. And regulations are written separately. They don't go through the Parliament for a vote, and they are meant to be smaller than the Act, because the politicians who we elect are meant to write the laws, and the regulations is more to logistics and how it functions outside of that. So they have put it in the Act that has to go before the Parliament for a vote in order to knock it out. Now, the government are not going to do that. And even as part of this review, not going to touch it. This is the powers that they wanted, and that they wanted to give to the jackboots of the state, the weaponisation of the Western Australian Police Force. Someone should study that. Perhaps I already am by default.
So he has this almost unlimited power. So what is a view, opinion and attitude that he cannot make a decision on? When I asked the Police Commissioner during estimates about what sort of provisions, regulations, or not so much regulations but guidelines around that, he gave me a very vague answer and basically said we don't really have anything in place for that. So it's completely wide open. What if the Police Commissioner one day decided that because your views on the left or on the right were actually so terrible that he would make a decision on this basis? I think it's a terrible precedent to set in any sort of legislation, because it can be used. It can be used at the moment. It's limited to firearms, but that particular mindset that would actually put that kind of a provision in a bill is the one that could find its way into other provisions.
Sorry, I boomed that video. But absolutely spot on. And the fact that the Western Australian Police do not even have guidance on what views, attitude, how do you even judge that? That can be very subjective. And I know there is a process. If a police officer does use that power he has, he writes a report, it goes to the Commissioner, and back the blue, no matter who. So who knows how far this will go or how quickly, but it does not look good. Now, the other issue that has come up, as part of all of this, I will say, it's not just specific to this report at this point in time, is the rhetoric and the level of emotion and anger that people have had because of this process. And by people, I mean we the people, the ones affected by the laws, who are losing our guns every day, losing our hobby, losing our passion, losing those skills. And when the chair of this committee, Dr. Katrina Stratton, tabled the report in Parliament earlier this week, this is what she had to say. Now, this is only my second time watching this, and I got quite animated when I saw it the first time, so I'm just going to react how I see fit.
This leads me to point 1.14 of the report on page 3. Criticism of the legislation did not justify the level of vitriol and hatred handed out by some individual members of the firearms community to the committee and to individual members. I want to be very clear. it was the female members of the committee who were the individual members who had attracted this significant and targeted portion of that vitriol. Of course, as public servants who have the immense privilege and therefore the responsibility of that public service, we expect robust engagement and, of course, therefore, at times criticism. And as the committee acknowledged in our report, we accept that there was consternation and inconvenience experienced by firearms users, particularly in regards to accessing the digital portal. However, the Honourable Lauren Cayune and I faced questions of our competency and our intelligence based purely on our gender. We had comments made on our physical appearance, our ability to understand our responsibilities, including the terms of reference on the committee, but also, and which are not acceptable as part of our roles or indeed any workplace role, challenges to our safety. I'll be very clear again that most members of the law-abiding firearms community engage respectfully, but these individuals I am referring to, all of whom identified as belonging to firearms stakeholder groups online, created fear and intimidation and concerns for our safety. We both adapted our behaviours online and in our other movements. And for me, this has extended to my 16-year-old daughter and how she gets to and from work.
Kids are off limits. I know how you're feeling, and I know what group she's talking about. Kids are off limit. Full stop. Kids are separate to their parents. We protect them. And I'm not having a debate about the age of consent. I've had too many bloody conversations with creepy libertarians about it. Kids are off limits, full stop, under any circumstances. And that goes both ways to her as well. When she's writing laws, our kids are off limits too. We are the parent, we raise them.
I have previously had the name of the street on which I live and the suburb published by a local newspaper when I was pre-selected in 2021. That really bothered me at the time. It scares me now. Again, this is not acceptable, even in our role as members of Parliament. It's not acceptable in any role or workplace, indeed in any community setting, nor in anyone's home.
So she's complaining that she's been doxed, and she's a member of the Labor Party. This is what the Labor Party did to the licensed firearm owners of Western Australia in March 2022, front page of the Wank Australian newspaper. The police minister at the time, Paul Papalia, directed the firearms branch to give the addresses and the types of firearms stored at locations across WA, focusing on Perth and Greater Perth, the capital city, which this excuse for a publication used to produce maps using bullet holes to identify on street maps where legal guns were being held in WA. Now, they had this information because it is mandatory to register firearms in Australia and in WA. Registration always leads to confiscation. We are seeing that now. And yet at the same time, we still have our representatives, our approved representative organisations saying we need to be mature and sign up to the WA Firearms Portal and not only give our address, but the GPS locations of where our safes are stored. After the government did this to us in March 2022, doxed us, and it was very quickly reverse engineered online by these amazing cyber hackers and data freaks to give the exact location of where legal firearm owners lived. I was in Perth at the time. I was wild. So to complain about being doxed when your government did the biggest disgusting doxing incident I have ever seen, putting public safety at risk because you've just put a shopping list online for the crooks to go and rob people's homes. There was, a few weeks after this, a man's house was broken into, he was set on fire, and his firearms were stolen. This is how the government in Western Australia, my beautiful home state, has treated law-abiding firearm owners throughout this whole time. And this is why I said I would never speak to this publication. I don't care, put me on the front page with the fake news. I don't care. You know, a girl with a gun, it really sells papers. I get it. But you are complicit in putting public safety at risk and the lives of individual people in WA by printing this map. And then she complains about her doxing experience. Now, I will say as well, I sympathise with her comments about how she was attacked based on her gender. I think the comments about competency were valid because I don't think she still understands calibers. But did you ever think when you accepted that committee, that chair, that report, that review, as a woman and with your Labor co-partner Lauren, did you ever think maybe you were being used by the men in your party? Because I know you said as a layperson, it is very difficult to understand this topic of firearm laws in Australia, let alone firearms itself, if you haven't been blessed with growing up with a father as a hunter and shooter. I get it. But you can go out and see for yourself, try it for yourself. Why didn't you go to a gun range? Why did that review committee not go out to a gun range? Did any of the groups invite them? I don't know if they would have come. But did you ever think the men in your party who know for a fact how toxic this issue is, no wonder the minister didn't show up to that review, and Papali is out there saying it's not my problem anymore. That doesn't mean you should be subjected to abuse and threats. Nobody should. But this is the level that we are getting to in WA, and I'm still feeling it, and I'm not even there. Let me let her finish.
This leads me to point 1.14 of the report on page 3. Criticism of the legislation did not justify the level of vitriol and hatred handed out by some individual members. Has extended to my 16-year-old. The name of the street on which I bothered me at the time. It scares me now. Again, this is not acceptable, even in our role as members of Parliament. It's not acceptable in any role or workplace, indeed in any community setting, nor in anyone's home. And I want to thank again my fellow committee members and the parliamentary staff for their concern and their attention regarding these matters. It serves too as a timely reminder that as owners of Facebook pages, including us as members of Parliament, that we are responsible for the comments that people make on our posts and the tone, therefore, of the debate and public discourse, including the debate that now continues regarding this committee inquiry and report.
And the debate will continue because people are not happy. The minority group of people in Western Australia, which is already shrinking as by design, there are people out there from my cold, dead hands. And that's how I would be if I still lived there. This is one of the big reasons I left, to be frank. Especially the gun limits, let alone the views, attitudes and opinions. I would have had my door kicked in for sure. Now, she did go on to give another little segment. I'll play that for you here.
It's interesting then that we have heard much these last few days and weeks of a great concern around the chamber for women's rights, and more so of our rights, even our need for protection and safety.
Gun rights are women's rights, for the record.
The premise of these is perhaps different, but as I've listened to these concerns, I'm hopeful that it means that that same concern for women will be reflected when we come to a range of matters that may come before us, including industrial relations, workplace safety, of changes in language and legislation and standing orders that currently effectively exclude us. That this same concern comes to bear when we are debating issues of access to healthcare, of superannuation and commerce, and of course when it comes to our right to be safe at home and in our intimate relationships, including the right to be protected from firearms.
So you have now been given a right in Australia to be protected from firearms. We don't have the right to bear arms. We don't even have the right to free speech. But according to Dr. Katrina Stratton, we have a right to be protected from firearms. And that is the attitude of this government. Even if you haven't threatened violence, you just have a firearm because that is your hobby, your passion, whatever it is, you are a threat to someone else's right to be safe from firearms, which is a new right that has just been created by the Western Australia Labor Party. I cannot even believe I'm saying this. Now, it's interesting that she also said about the conversation and tone of things on Facebook. I have been subjected to similar things from the very same community she is talking about, called all sorts of names, all this fake news spread about me, horrible things. And I'm not even a politician getting paid 6 figures to put up with this bullshit. I will handle valid criticism, but I'm not going to get into the gutter with people who push out things about me that are not true to serve their own interests when I am here trying to fight for my people and my community, which is you, the same person calling me names online. And I will continue to fight for you and your rights, your God-given rights, not these made-up rights, because I feel that is my purpose. Just wanted to put that on the record, because it does take its toll on you. I don't want anyone's sympathy. I'm not having a whinge. I'll have a drink of concrete and harden the F up. I get it. I can do that for you. But it does take its toll. And you could see she was visibly upset. And whatever you say about me, make sure you will say it to my face. That's all I ask. I much prefer face-to-face conversation. It can be a bar fight, or we can have a drink together and laugh it off. One of the two, that's fine. But don't get behind a keyboard and bring down someone who is fighting for you every day, despite the fact I don't have to be doing this. Now, also as part of the debate in Parliament this week about this bloody review and the report, the One Nation guy, this number 2 on the ticket, Philip Scott, gave a bit of a speech too. I don't know him. I have had a few conversations with Rod Caddies, who was their number 1 and got up. This is what the One Nation guy had to say about this whole firearms debate.
Speak on the Standing Committee on Legislation's report on the Firearms Act 2024. The saga that has been the Firearms Act refuses to go away for this government, and for good reason. These laws have upset farmers, they have upset doctors, they have upset antique collectors. They've upset the 32,234 signatories to the petition tabled last year by the Honourable Nick Goran. They've upset the 20,669 signatories to the petition tabled this year by the Honourable Dr Brian Walker. And from 2,670 submissions to the inquiry, the committee states that they were almost universally critical of the legislation. This weighty number of submissions was despite public submissions not being actively sought through media advertisements, as noted by the report in point 1.2.
This has been another issue, calling our submissions unsolicited. You don't want to hear from we the people about your laws. You're not going to give us the liberty of having our say, so you call it unsolicited and tell us we're not going to publish it online because you're not an approved representative organisation part of the club. This is how they're running democracy in WA.
Whilst absorbing the 47 findings in this report, I noticed a common trend. The legislation either offends against, falls foul of, or is contrary to a fundamental legislative principle. What are fundamental legislative principles, or FLPs? They are adapted from Section 4 of Queensland's Legislative Standards Act 1992 and described by the Act as being the principles relating to legislation that underlie a parliamentary democracy based on the rule of law. These are a very worthy set of guiding principles for legislation that the inquiry's terms of reference required the committee to apply to the Firearms Act for consistency with the FLPs. 18 of the committee's 47 findings concluded that different sections of the Firearms Act either offend against, fall foul of, or are contrary to the FLPs, but not one of the recommendations proposes an amendment to the Act to ensure provisions are consistent with the FLPs. Instead, the report explains away the Act's inconsistencies with FLPs as either justified in the public interest or justified to protect public safety. But for there to be this many sections inconsistent with the FLPs, without one amendment to the Act being proposed, presents a clear missed opportunity to pursue genuine evidence-based reform, as asserted in the motion moved earlier today by the Honourable Rob Horseman during non-government business.
So in summary, even though these laws breach fundamental legislative principles, which are what the government is meant to abide by when writing laws, justice, equality, fairness, all those wonderful buzzwords. Even though the gun laws don't adhere to that principle that we need in a democracy, it's been given the tick of approval. Not one recommendation said to change the laws that were in clear breach of this. Not one. And let's listen to what Phil Twist had to say about this. And this is in relation to Henry VIII clauses that have been breached too.
I'll find my notes. So I just really want to read out just a quote actually from this report. So it's from section 325. It says the Henry VIII provisions have historically been felt to be legally repugnant in that they remove from the Parliament to the Executive the power to make or repeal statute law. They offend against the theory of separation of powers. It goes on to say that more recently the courts have been more willing to accept the validity of regulations made under such provisions, so long as there is direct and unambiguous authority to make them in the parent statute.
That is quite a scary comment. If the judges are upholding these laws that are in breach of Henry VIII clauses, then they are more likely to rule that they are valid.
Maybe that's still there, but it's been effectively overridden in a number of cases in this Act and in the regs. There is more acceptance that Henry VIII clauses will not be declared invalid or be found objectionable, and there is a process of proper scrutiny of the subsidiary legislation. And I'd argue that there isn't proper scrutiny, particularly given the sheer volume of the regulations that have come through and the experience that I've had of people ringing me, writing to me, talking to me when I visited them, and the numerous emails where clearly scrutiny and clarity around these regulations has not been in place.
Keep writing to your MPs. That's the message I got out of Phil's speech there. It makes a difference. Don't be abusive. And kids are off limits too. But the reason I write submissions and I put out all of this stuff and I write to the minister and I write to them is because it is part of history. You will be on the right side of history, because that email that goes to your parliamentarian, your representative, will be filed, and they keep a tally of how many people contacted them about a specific issue. And then when it comes to election time, they know, okay, well, the big issue in our electorate is we've got this many pissed off firearm owners. This is how it works. It still has some effect, especially for those new politicians like Phil Twiz, like Philip Scott. Keep having your voices heard. That is what they are paid to do. Listen and represent and serve. Serve the people. We need to remind them of that. Thank you for watching my video. My name's Kate Fantanell, or Lady Liberty Australia. I will be bumping out some more this week, hopefully. Please like, subscribe and follow my channel. Share this around. I'm trying to get the word out of just how bad things are going back home for my people in Western Australia and Australia too. Jump in the comments if you have any questions or thoughts, and I will see you all again soon.